so let's give a big, warm Clark welcome to Dave Barcos.
Thanks, Guy. We've known each other for a long time. I appreciate the invite. And you mentioned, my background. We've known each other for a long time. I work with startups. Is kind of where my passion and expertise lies now. And what I find, and the reason I love working with tech folk and people that are learning programming, is what they have is they start to develop this sense of how to get things done, and then this light bulb goes off in their head. Oh, we can do this. And a lot of times that we can do this is an actual business. So I love when people see those kind of opportunities, when they see things inside of their world that can turn into solid businesses. And that's one of the things that over my career, since the time that I've known Bruce, it's been probably 5 years or so. We have built an incubator. We've run an accelerator program where we had 5 companies come through, coach them on go-to-market strategies. The incubator that we have now is an advisory organization where we have service providers that come in and can help inside of the business side of the piece of technology startups that people are building. And it's been exciting. It's been exciting. But I'd love to find out what you guys are seeing and what you guys are interested in, how you got into what you're doing and what you see the potential is, and if you maybe are seeing some of those ideas pop up about business or opportunities. The deafening silence. The deafening silence. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrew. We just opened up a new IT company called Think IT Online, and I've been planning on focusing on helping small and mid-sized companies plan and implement IT strategies based on cloud solutions. So
very cool.
Services, Office 365 for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Is that your background is in IT desktop support or is inside of the programming side?
IT desktop support.
Okay.
But I didn't have much programming background whatsoever.
Got it.
So that's kind of my field of web development stuff.
Yeah, there's obviously a huge shift to the cloud. People are kind of finding out. Some people don't know what the cloud is. My wife still has no clue. When I tell her, why she can, take pictures on her phone and have them on the desktop, it still kind of baffles her. But that's cool. When did you start that?
I filed the paperwork for it in June. I started doing some work in April.
Got it.
I'm still figuring out a lot of the stuff like accounting. Just signed up for zip books instead of using my own hodgepodge accounting stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We kind of make a distinction as well as when we say a high impact startup. You have the potential to do that based on the services that you implement for people. It still at its core becomes a consultancy. So we look at high impact and scalable businesses, which are generally the ones that you're starting to hear about on Shark Tank and things like that, where there's a big investment multiple. We don't do a lot with Main Street businesses, but there are a ton of people where they're fundamentally their business is in the cloud, and it makes very different. It's a different mindset, right? You're gonna have to coach people as well, not about the technology about it, but about the mindset of how they use something like that and why it's beneficial. So, cool.
Who else wants to share with Dave why they're here?
Yeah.
Perry Dawkins, graphic designer, a lot of print publishing experience, some video and animation for web, and waited way too long to learn web development, so that's why I'm here.
Amen.
Who else?
Nice.
Yeah. Brent Zupp. I worked in the content manager in Silicon Valley for a good number of years, but I never got the technical side of it. I was more editorial and liaison between the technical and the editorial. And so I'm here just to get some of that technical skills to.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you start looking at the job descriptions, and it happened inside of secretarial, right around when PageMaker and thing first started coming out. The first desktop publishing pieces is the secretary used to be the one that was typing letters, and now they're just going to start, because it's on the same computer, we're just going to have them start doing the newsletter as well, right? And the same thing has happened, right? So now, because you can do a newsletter and you happen to have Adobe Illustrator, well, you should probably be able to do a logo, right?
Exactly.
Right? And so, and once you do a logo, well, you put the logo on the top of a web page, so, right, you just save a Word file as a web page, why not? And so it's just kind of expanded, and this list of bullet points just is huge, and it's crazy, and it crushes industries. And anyway, that's my soapbox. One of my many soapboxes. Yeah.
Yeah, in relation to that, I'm going back for the Associate of Applied Technology and Web Development, so just a 2-year track. And I have a bachelor's already in graphic design and video editing, animation, and I did learn HTML and CSS, like front end,
right,
and some JavaScript. So now I'm kind of like getting into the web development aspect.
Yeah.
And what I want to do is, I think I want to be more of a front end designer, like developer designer. So I want to use like graphic design skills.
Yeah.
The fun stuff with maybe some front end, maybe some back end, and put it all together.
Yeah.
Or be maybe.
Yeah. What's really interesting is because I didn't have any of that programmatic skill, it didn't. At the time, it didn't matter. But what I had was Photoshop skills, and Photoshop worked in a color house. And at a color house, this is like old school. You used to take photos and you would put them on transparencies, and then those transparencies would get on oil-mounted drums to scan them, and then they go up onto the Cytex machine, which is this $500,000 machine that did all the color correction. And we were doing tons of Nike catalogs, and I was sitting on a Mac that was supposed to take desktop files and put them over into a RIP to go over onto these high-end machines, and I would take out the type, I would take out the photos, I would use the structures of boxes and stuff. And they were doing Nike catalogs over on the Cytex side, and I went, I got Photoshop, I could do that. I could cut a clipping path, I could put up shadows and everything else. And so I started learning what those guys did and transplanting it over here into the desktop side. And didn't think, I thought it was a great idea because I really wanted to do it, I wanted to learn it. It truthfully wasn't very smart, because we found out that when I did what I did and we compared it side by side, mine was just as good, and the amount that they were paying me versus the amount that they were paying them was like 1/5 of the cost, but they could still charge the same thing. So our department basically had to do 3,500 shoes out of the first Nike catalog, and it was me doing nothing but outlining and cloning and drop shadows and all this kind of stuff, just insanely on Photoshop. And they were kind of going,
Yeah.
$12 an hour.
You learned actions though.
They what?
You learned actions though.
There weren't actions. It was Photoshop 1.0.
Oh, okay.
No, this is before channels and all that kind of stuff.
Pretty later.
But the other thing that did is, I was going to say, is I moved up into the agency world because of those Photoshop skills. I moved up into the agency world, and in the agency world, you don't have as much of that you don't have a lot of that added information. You don't have, I want a designer who can do this. They really kind of separate the talents a little bit more. That's been a little bit destroyed because nobody wants to pay those agency rates. But when you start to, like, I've got a 25-year career now as a creative director and art director. That means you're basically coming up with concepts, designing things that look good, and then telling other people how to execute them. And so they don't care that you can program a web page out of it. They don't care that you can build it out, right? But I know enough about the structure of how things get done to start talking about why you would need a database inside of a back end, abstract those pieces out of the front end. So I can talk the talk, I just can't program the code. But that separation doesn't exist inside of kind of what I would call everyday clients, the clients that you're going to hit that are moving their stuff to the cloud. That kind of abstraction, doesn't start to become a distinction. So, for those top tier clients, it matters, but nobody cares what a creative director is. Nobody knows what a creative director is. So,
Dave,
what else?
you mentioned the word incubator before.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? Because I think that may be a new
term
thing for a lot of people here.
Yep. Startups have always kind of been a thing. We didn't really call them startups. I started a company in the Bay Area in the mid-'80s, and it was in desktop design, but we quickly went national and had we're doing a lot of kind of notable work. But it has become a thing that a startup on the continuum of becoming a business is an investable entity. And in order to make that happen better, organizations have formed around it, one of which is an incubator. They've generally been attached to colleges, to educational institutions, and tied to research money. So you'll see them in the medical field a lot. But basically what it is a core group that's committed to the proposition of helping a startup company succeed. In many cases, that has to do with subsidized space. So the rent that you're paying is going to be subsidized. It might even be free. It depends on the organization. But they bring other resources. Sometimes they're purchasing equipment. Sometimes they're bringing expertise. Some of the circle of influencers can come together and help that company grow beyond what they could normally do. So they've really become kind of in fashion over probably the last 10 years. There's another parallel thing, and it's a separate thing. I always use the acronym CIA, and it's a co-working space, an incubator, and an accelerator. If you're anybody familiar with a co-working space? Heard anything about them?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's basically a place to throw down your laptop that you get Wi-Fi and coffee, and you can have access to a meeting room. Great thing about those is you're generally around some like-minded people. You make great things happen there. They're cheaper than leasing a regular space. We've got 2 of them here in Vancouver. Actually 3 in Vancouver. One's over on the east side. But they're not very intentional about who comes in it. An incubator can be that physical space, and then starts to be intentional about who they let in here, right? So you're not just getting a real estate agent who just needs a floating desk. Now you might be specialized in tech. You might be specialized in food. You might be specialized in apparel, right? So now you're making sure that the people that are in that area all have something that they can contribute to each other. And that's an incubator. And then an accelerator program is a fixed length program where investors actually give you money for the development of your idea for an equity share in your company. So about 3 years ago, I started looking into building an incubator, and we chose to build an incubator that was not connected to a physical space. So what we do is we bring the expertise, we bring the connections, and we bring the ability to actually kind of roll up our sleeves and do work alongside the companies that come in. So we're a little bit different, kind of a new hybrid in the marketplace. We have supporters that are through legal, through programming, through design, through marketing that come in, and we get as a member benefit of the organization, you get access to those services. So that's an incubator, and it's interesting. I think one of the things I talk to people a lot about is they don't really kind of understand the spectrum of when you first come up with an idea. Everybody says, "Oh, I got a great idea. If somebody just gave me, $2 million, I could turn it into something." That's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. And so people they kind of bring this employee mentality, right? Is I have a great idea, so if you pay me like an employee, I'll turn it into something. And the investors kind of look at that and go, why don't you prove it is something, and then I'll give you the money. And so there's, we say not all ideas are opportunities, and not all opportunities are businesses. So the bridge, the incubator, is kind of in the business of moving people along those stages to get them closer to the point where they are potentially investable.
Are the people you work with, Dave, with the incubator open to the guidance, or do you find that sometimes it's a battle trying to, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's one of the great things about entrepreneurs is that they have drive and ambition and a vision and I'm going to say it this way, but a bullheadedness to be able to make something happen. That can be a huge asset. It can be an absolute huge asset. You have to tell the world, because the world doesn't really understand what you understand, and it's your job to make them understand. So you get this kind of armor when somebody tells you that something's wrong. You get this armor of saying, no, but this is why. This is why that's right. This is why that's right. And so you kind of immediately are kind of pushing back. Very often, when you're dealing with entrepreneurs and you're kind of working with them, you have to find other ways to help them understand a new opportunity. So we call it entrepreneurial jujitsu. It's basically finding ways to get them to come up with our ideas at times. Yeah.
How are you found? How would an entrepreneur find you? Are you like the small business, the SBA?
Yep.
Do people get reference to you, or how do you go out and?
You found me. Yeah, that's a good point. So I work pretty heavily inside of the startup community, but founders, the really interesting thing is like the talent that you guys have. Every one of you probably looks at different websites, watches different TV channels. We've fragmented our media anymore, so you don't all read the Columbian or the Vancouver Business Journal or whatever it is. So I do a lot of events, and we post them up on Meetup. We post them up on Eventbrite for the larger ones, and really kind of push out where we can to do things to just find out who's out there. And people kind of trip on us at times. Yeah, we do happy hours. I meet tons of people at happy hour. Because believe it or not, founders are drinkers. It's kind of a thing. I don't know how that happened. Maybe it's kind of soothed the pain of building a business. Yeah.
I know, like, as far as the concept of like entrepreneurship, it seems more like a team effort. What about on the more individual side, as far as like with the freelancer or someone working on their own,
right,
like a digital nomad? Are there anything that you might know of or do on that side to like help those people that don't necessarily want to be in that team but just want to work on their own?
Yeah, no, it's a great thing, and that's what I've done. 25 years freelance. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough as an independent, as a solo freelancer, and that's as you make a distinction, that's a different type of company as well, right? I mean, as a freelancer, the things I would say is never underestimate hustle, right? Never underestimate hustle. You want to find out the people that you're going to work for. Do not count on the fact that you're putting up a Facebook post and it's going to get you the attention that you want. Pick up the phone call. Just because you said, I sent an email to somebody, if you haven't heard back from them, you have to just assume that you just have to be doggedly persistent in getting in touch with them. If they're somebody you want to talk to because they're somebody you want to work with and you believe you can benefit them, you get in front of them. Yeah, and there are. Take a look at Meetup, right? The other great thing that will happen is freelancers love to collaborate. So go to meetup.com, look inside of your core expertise, and find a group.
And with the freelancer aspect now, is there any like resources or groups that, you know, like, I know like one thing that's kind of challenging for some freelancers is the whole tax thing. You know, since you are just an independent contractor essentially,
Yeah.
you know, not very many freelancers know exactly what would go into doing those type of taxes. Is there any place where you'd be able to find resources specifically geared towards freelancers?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, for freelancers. So Freelancers Union is an organization, puts on monthly meetups, and there's a great tied-in network that can help you there. I would also say Katie Lane is a lawyer, and for $750, she set up my standard letters of engagement and template statements of work that I do. Really good. She just gets it. She gets it. She's really good at working with freelancers. That is her gig. Katie Lane, KatieLane. If you want to get me later, I can give you her number. But yeah, freelancer is a solid business. But the thing that most people don't do is they don't treat it like a business. And you have to, right? You have to get outside, because the cyclical thing that happens, and this goes for anybody that's going to freelance in programming, design, apparel, it doesn't matter, is when you're working, you're making all your money and you're broke because you're not selling, and then because you didn't sell, your money goes into the shitter. And that's when you decide you're going to sell. When you have a free, you might get a $25,000 gig. Congratulations. If you space out your payments correctly, you've got some stability. That's only going to last you like 30, 60 days after you're done. If you're not selling on the way up, when you think you're so busy that you're staying up till 2, 3 a.m., if you're not selling at that time, you just go through these huge peaks and valleys. Everyone is going to tell you about that. And to make it a real business, you got to fix that. Yeah.
In an incubator, does there need to be sort of a critical mass before they really start kicking in, or is there like a onesie-twosie situation as far as people who are working in the incubator?
You mean members of the incubator?
Yeah.
It depends on it. It absolutely depends on it. We're putting together events where we're pulling the members in, but it's kind of like, it can be like a chat room. An incubator can be like a chat room. There may be 500 people that are, their Slack chat dates me. I don't know that anybody does chat rooms anymore. But there may be 500 people, but at any one time, if you're in one room or one channel, there's no conversations going on. So you could have 15, 20, 30 members of an incubator, and at any given time there's only 1 or 2 in there. And so if the culture of the incubator isn't about engagement, then you can miss out on a lot. So I wouldn't say there's a critical mass. I think it's more about the intention of the incubator. Kind of pull people together.
You want to just talk a little bit about what Pi was?
Yeah, Pi was Portland, and it is not dead, by the way. I don't know what you know about that.
I know it's not dead.
Okay. So Portland Incubator Experiment, PIE. Rick Tarosi was a blogger about the startup community, and this is basically what he did. He put the Silicon Florist was his blog, and he would just write about all these new startups that he was kind of finding out about. And people started paying attention, and he met Remy. Rennie Gleason. Rennie Gleason was a creative director at Wieden Kennedy, and they became friends. They started talking about it, and they started talking about, hey, you know what? Brand is something, right? Telling people stories, right? That's kind of what he was doing with the blog. And so they convinced Wieden Kennedy to put together a bunch of money and call it an incubator experiment. And they put the first cohort was, trying to remember. I want to say 9-10 years ago or something, and they put I think it was like 18 companies through first cohort, and decided that every year they would continue to remake that. So they had a physical space. They called themselves an incubator. It was actually an accelerator. That's why I say you'll see a lot of kind of contradiction in these terms. They actually paid the companies money for equity, for an equity stake. And Cloudability was probably one of the first. Cloudability is a cloud analytic. I'm going to misspeak exactly what they are. It's a cloud analytics costing forecasting tool. So you don't know what Amazon Web Services are going to cost you, or Google Drive or your Google services. They have a way to forecast the bandwidth to level that thing out so you don't get sticker shock at the end of the month. But that was an idea that came out of Pi. It was one of the first pieces. Actually, it was pitched originally in a startup weekend. But they were around, so Pi was kind of active, and they took, I think, 5 cohorts, 5 years, 5 success. A cohort is the group that they accept one time a year to put through their fixed length program. So they did, I think, 5 cohorts that they brought through, and then they kind of went on a hiatus, and they said, we're going to kind of step back and see if we can figure out how best to really move the meter for the companies that were coming in. So,
when you say, what's fixed link? What is that?
It just means it's an 18-week, 16 to 18-week program. And during that, what they'll do, the other accelerator programs, some of the most notable are 1776, 500 Startups, Techstars. Those are fixed length programs where you apply into it, and then they will kind of put you through boot camp for the first 3 weeks. They call it Mentor Madness. Techstars call it Mentor Madness, and they basically take all these really high-powered execs and they beat the snot out of your idea. You think you have a company? No, not yet. And you get so much advice, you get all this whiplash. But then the rest is kind of successively teaching you how to build that back up, so that the financial underpinnings are there, forecasting is there, you have a solid market that you can approach and refine the product, right? Refine and build the product. So, yeah. You raised another hand, I thought.
Me?
No, I'm just going to pick on you, Bruno.
Join the club.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think, here's the most interesting entrepreneurial myth that I think that is really common is when people think it's that $1 million idea, is that you really do not know, and you got to get it under your skin as a founder, that idea may not be what becomes that successful business. We all hear about these rock star businesses. We hear about Uber. We hear about Instagram. We hear about these big successes, and we just kind of went, oh my God, if I only had that idea. Well, if you trace the lineage of those things, it's insane the way they started. And what they did is they developed an ideology to let the market dictate what they were selling and the company that they built on top of it.
Like how Nintendo made playing cards before they started making...
I got a bad ear, maybe speak up a bit.
Like how Nintendo started making playing cards before they started making video games?
Yeah. What you have to understand is 2 things. First of all, your idea will evolve, and second of all, people just generally don't understand what you are about, and they will have their spin on it, and that is what they pay for. So that's what you have to kind of give them. But it's a really kind of strong tension between your vision of what you are accomplishing and what you're building. So, yeah.
How does the equity path work through incubator and accelerator? Are the accelerator dudes, is there any real difference between what goes on in an accelerator? Are the people who work in the accelerator, are those the angel guys?
Yeah. So there's a couple different formats. There are incubators where they're front loaded, and basically what they do is they collect angel investors and they say, okay, we're going to take a cohort and everybody's going to dole out $20,000 for 6% equity to any of the companies that get accepted. That's one way to do it. Another is that they do back end loading, which is where they get accepted into the program and then they invite people to the demo day at the end of the program and they say, guess what? Look what we just did. And the investors would then pool money is generally what they'll do. They'll develop a fund, and the companies get invited into the fund. So not everybody gets invited into the fund. Some drop out, so it adds in investors at the end, and it weeds out some of the ones that weren't investable. Yes, it is angels that are involved in it, generally not institutional. Are you guys familiar with the kind of pathway of investment?
No, be a good thing to go.
Awesome. Okay. You guys have seen Shark Tank?
Oh yeah.
Right? Wealthy individuals that are deciding to do individual investments themselves, they are angels. There are other things called angel funds. And an angel fund is where, say, all of them decided that they wanted to put $20 million into a fund, and then the fund would make the investment, not the individuals, right? So that's another way. There's also an angel network, which is what we're building. And an angel network is we have, I'd love to say on speed dial, we don't yet, but we have high net worth individuals, and we do events where we put those people up and say, these are up and coming companies, and what do you think? Is this something you'd like to invest in? But that's completely ad hoc. It doesn't look anything like Shark Tank. The conversations are some of the same about equity. But that doesn't happen until you have proven something about your ability to produce something that people are going to buy. Right? So then that idea to opportunity to a business, we say there's 6 stages of a startup, and there's idea, concept, commitment, validating, scaling, and establishing. Right? So those are 6. You can go to startupcommons.org. They'll show you that spectrum. Basically what it means is that when you have an idea, it means you've identified a problem. When you have a concept, it means you have a solution that you think will fill that problem. When you get a commitment, it's when you're getting enough, you're starting to put time behind it, possibly money, and possibly getting a couple other people to come together that believe that is something that they want to build. And the validation side is when you actually get something, we call it an MVP, minimum viable product. Right? It's the stripped down version of this thing that you're trying to build, and you actually get it in front of somebody that says, yeah, I would pay for that. And you start to kind of build that relationship. And that is the point when somebody else is going to give you money. That's the best time to do it. Right? So on that spectrum, you can imagine identifying the problem, finding a solution, starting to get some people in. That's all what we call bootstrapping, right? That's you on your dime figuring out that this is something that's going to turn into something valuable, right? And until it's kind of proven to the point that the market says it's something viable, not that you say it's a good idea, it's not a war of opinions, right? That's if you've done your job well, that's when it's useful to start having investor conversations. The first people that you'll have those conversations with are generally angels. So there's angels, there's angel networks, there's angel funds. Those are high risk, high reward, right? They're willing to take a flyer because you haven't still proven out that this business is going to take off the way you intend it to. As you take on that money, you go into the scaling phase. And that's where in the tech world, for most tech solutions, that's like all money. right? To set up the servers, to build the code, to set up everything on the technical side, to get one subscriber cost $100,000, $200,000, whatever it costs, right? But the next one starts to chip away at that. Now you're 2 subscribers, right? So your cost per subscriber starts to go down. So that exponential, that's why you see a lot of investment in tech, because for every new subscriber, for every new person that comes on, that's what we say, when we say scalable, that's what they're looking for, because that's kind of, free and cheap money for them. That's why they want to prove something, then they're ready to give it to you so that you can add new people to do tech support, to do QC, to bring in new features, to kind of build out the business. So you go through that phase with angel round, and they call that bridge funding sometimes too. And then the next piece is what they call institutional investing. So this is VCs. This is venture capitalists. These are larger organizations, much more formal in their structure, and they're going to take stronger vetted ideas, right? Where they know they're pouring kerosene on the fire, not where they're taking a real flyer. So, and then that kind of leads to, ultimately either what they call a liquidity event, which is either an IPO, going public, or an acquisition, right? But those are way down the line. And at every given round, at every given stage across the process, you got to be ready to give up your slice. Very few people get to the end and still are retaining, any sort of majority share inside of the company. So it's a really different journey. It's not just about you having the smart idea and being the brilliant one to take that all the way across the finish line. Great examples. Who's seen the reports? Travis Kalanick from Uber. Guy's a jerk, right? But he needed to be a jerk to drive the aggressive growth path that Uber took. He physically muscled out cab companies and municipalities and just horned his way in everywhere. He was that bullheaded one. He wouldn't take any crap, right? The flip side of that is he was a dick. And he really just got everybody pissed off about it, right? And that is, that company to succeed and grow and to become something has to have different leadership, has to have different, so that's just one classic example. I mean, Steve Jobs got kicked out of his own company, for God's sakes. Yeah?
How does a startup guy who's basically a lamb pick up a dick?
What? How do you find a guy that's going to do that?
How do you find a dick? Yeah.
I'm not putting that in the podcast.
I'm not going to repeat that one for the camera.
It has to go on YouTube too.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's a misperception that you need to be, right? It comes down to the skill sets that you need. It comes down to the talents that you need. But there's different ways to be that. So you don't need that, right? Great example. Some of the advisors that we deal with are invested in a company. They do industrial design. They have a separate company that does industrial design for dental products. And they met this other woman who had a consumer product that was for, you'd love this, for making almond milk. And her tagline is that we can milk your nuts. Drove that one home all day long. She's got every joke in the world. Anyway, one of the founders of the other company has that industrial design background. He also has that sales background. So what they did is they formed a partnership. They put some industrial design into the process. She'd been doing it for 4 years and hadn't had any traction. they led her to a pivot. Have you guys heard of a pivot? Change in direction, kind of an evolution of your thinking, where they would actually be like a Keurig type model, right? The razor blade model. They designed a package, and so now she's selling the nut pulp instead of the physical device. She was going to make this, pressing device that ground up the almonds and did the pressing, and this was going to be like a, desktop or a countertop device. She's got incredible acceleration because they helped her pivot, brought that in, and they're also just out there salespeople kind of guy. So you don't have to be that jerk step on people. You have to be assertive. You have to be out there, but it doesn't take the jerk all the time.
And one thing I've noticed, and you and I have spoken about this over coffee, Dave, is that a lot of us tend to think of startups as like software or apps and things.
Right.
But more and more of these startups, right, are consumerized products or services or just things not software or apps.
Right. No, it's absolutely true. I'm going to see if I have one. One of our, I just gave away my last one. Well, it's in the car. One of our, I didn't.
Can you make that some almond milk?
There what?
Can you make that some almond milk?
No, I don't. I don't have that. No, one of our startups is a mushroom jerky company. Food, which is generally not incredibly profitable. It's a very tough industry, but it's a passionate industry. And if you carve out a niche, you can do something. This is he has been importing this for about 5 years. Got it into about 100 retail stores that are selling it, and kind of looked at his growth path, and what we helped him do was arrange for him to work with him on the cost accounting and the manufacturing that he needed to do. The relationships needed to be in place to manufacture it here. So it was a vegetarian version. This is now a vegan version. This is not available for sale yet. He's just done this like within the past 2 weeks. Yeah, and what we'll do is we'll work with him on online marketing. Because right now he kind of has the distribution set up for retail, but it's a different side of the model to build an online business. It becomes a cost per acquisition business instead of a distributor wholesale-based business.
There was a company in Portland that farmed crickets.
Oh, POTA.
Yeah, POTA.
POTA's amazing.
And they were at a startup where they were part of something, right?
Yeah. Those guys are brilliant. They come out of Ivy League schools and basically had looked at the food chain and said, this is really ridiculous. The rest of the world's population eats insects. We just have kind of this, we get kind of skeeved out about it. But look at the grimace. Would you eat a cricket?
What?
Would you eat a cricket?
I don't know. I see those candies that have like those crickets and stuff in them, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. So here's how this plays out is as a protein source and as a sustainable protein source, it is bar none. Whereas it would take 100 gallons to produce a pound of beef, it would take a gallon to produce a pound of these equivalent protein out of crickets. So it is an incredibly sustainable source. And they starve the crickets, freeze-dry them, and then grind them up into a flour, and you bake it into something, you would never know it was there.
As long as I don't see that process.
Yeah,
Crickets are a
and
huge
there are
source.
some major players that are doing it. If you look at if you search up cricket flour or cricket bars, Cliff Bar is putting together some research. I'm not sure that it's launched, but Cliff Bar is building a cricket flour bar. So yeah. Anyway, they set this thing up and they put a cricket farm down in McMinnville. No, just south. I want to say Malala. I think they couldn't find a location that would let them keep the crickets because at one point in their life cycle they're really loud And nobody wanted that many crickets. They like a little crickets, but they didn't want that many crickets in their backyard, so they had to find a space down in Malala. Yeah?
Now, you mentioned angel investing a little while ago, but one of the things I wanted to ask is how, if at all, does crowdfunding come into play in that as well?
Yeah, it does. That so it used to be that a lot like Shark Tank, right? Is people would go on Shark Tank because they wanted to get a deal, and people used to do crowdfunding because they wanted the money that it netted. In this larger kind of scheme of, I have an idea, I want to prove it out, I want to build a company out of it. Crowdfunding, for a lot of purposes, is not about the money, it's about proving the concept. So at that point where you're talking about validation, that's exactly, it's a great way to do that. But crowdfunding is a really interesting double-edged sword because everybody thinks you just go, oh, I'm going to list it up on Kickstarter. Oh, I'm going to put it up on Indiegogo. So the Goodness, Goodnuss is the nut milk company. Last night, so they launched their Indiegogo campaign yesterday. They're looking to raise $20,000. I logged on at 7 in the morning or something when it first launched, and they had about 600. Awesome, right? So what they understand is that you bring the party to the campaign. You don't wait for it to happen. There's a real formula for setting up a Kickstarter campaign, which is you bring the party and you be ready. You have basically verbal commitments to raise about 50% of your overall goal within the first day or two. If you don't do that, then algorithms inside of those engines don't list you, and so you get lost in the shuffle. So she had a campaign last night, or she had a launch party last night down in Portland, and by the end of the party, they had crashed Indiegogo and raised about $9,000.
Wow!
But those were contributions that they had basically told everybody about. So everybody was ready to write the check. They just did it that day when it launched. That's going to launch them up on top of Indiegogo. You'll get a Kickstarter gives you a staff pick idea, things like that. So it is a good strategy, but it's not like buying a lottery ticket and then waiting. You really got to actively build it. It's a marketing campaign to make that raise successful. And then that raise can prove to the angel investors that this is something people want and it's viable.
So that would be like part of the bootstrapping part of,
yeah.
of it, as
exactly.
far as like the crowdfunding, to be able to get some money involved so that we're not doing it all alone.
Exactly.
Crowdfunding can be a really risky thing because there's been plenty of examples of things on like Kickstarter that they basically take money. I can't remember exactly.
If you speak up just a little, I can't.
Oh, sorry, I can't remember exactly who it was, but
Cooler.
They were they were building like a laser razor.
Yeah.
And they had like a whole video for it, and not only talking about the concept, but supposedly what people thought they were saying was actual examples of the product.
Right.
It was an elaboration. It was just, It was all smoke and mirrors. It was just them saying, this is what our idea should be like. If you ever actually saw like a prototype of what they were actually working with, nothing like what you were saying.
Yep.
And basically they just took the money and ran.
Yeah.
And then you bump into the issue of you could be really successful from the crowdfunding, and you'll get the attention of somebody who's bigger, who's going to go ahead and invest in you. But then you'll lose the confidence to people who've been throwing money at you, because then they're like, oh, but now you have these actual investors. And then they wonder, well, how long have you had the investors? There are examples of people who already had investors who were already interested in it, and they were only using the crowdfunding as a means of proving to the investors that they had something that people would want to buy. And that can also lose you confidence.
But is that wrong?
It depends.
Seriously?
For the people who are investing in it, sometimes they think it's sneaky, and then you can lose some of their confidence, and then you kind of have this mar here.
But that's just a few people.
Oh, it depends, you
I
know,
mean, a Kickstarter deal's not that big of a deal, and, you know, I mean, so you're gonna give a bunch of people some thumb drive for $50. And you've got your word out, and you've got some initial marketing and some feedback.
Well, the first example that I can think of actually came from the video game industry was when they were funding a new Shenmue game, which is this big cult classic thing. And they went out they were basically saying, hey, we're gonna have like a Kickstarter and everybody's gonna crowdfund. If you guys can raise this for us, we're gonna bring you this game that you've been waiting for years. What they never told anybody is they already have like, they already had like a big publishing company behind them. People were pissed when they found out about that.
Yeah, it depends on the culture that you.
I haven't heard anything more about the game since then. Is the thing, so I'm not even sure if there's
Yeah, I mean you hit on a really interesting point, right? Is business is a really interesting place to navigate, and the better people that you work with operate under integrity, right? And if social media has told us one thing, and the connectedness that we have inside of the internet have taught us anything else, it's that you better live in a glass house because somebody's going to find out something. And backhanded dealings and side room deals and things like that, they come out. And to your point, do you care? Depends. I literally, I wish I could say it doesn't matter, but it does matter in some instances, and it matters more in other instances. Right? If nobody gets hurt, if nobody loses their savings. In basic crowdfunding, like, so I heard somebody call out Coolest Cooler, right? Local success out of Portland.
Yeah.
Right? One of the #1 Kickstarter campaigns that ever came in, they were asking for, I think, $1.5 million, raised $13 million, right? So I know the guy that did it, and what happened through that process became a betrayal of trust to the people that came into the individual. And that then became the story. And that story became a bigger issue. And that comes, in that case, it was a hardware device. When he got the extra funds, he said, okay, I realize the expectation is higher than I had planned, so he re-engineered that product. The things that he put in there to the idea of it was kind of vaporware, right? The cooler that he presented, he redid the motor, he redid the Bluetooth speaker that he put in there, a ton of re-engineering that happened. That over-engineering screwed his production timelines. That put him low on cash because of now he had to produce more of them, and he engineered it more. That meant that his production deadline was longer, which meant he couldn't deliver on his promise, and truthfully, he ran out of cash. Sounds crazy, but it happens in larger things, right? And what he had to do is when he started getting those in, rather than filling the orders of the people inside of the Kickstarter campaign, he actually had to sell them at retail. So he was selling those things in the open market before he actually fulfilled the Kickstarter campaign bonuses, right? That became the news story. Not only was he late, not only was this, right? All this stuff added in. So he became this Kickstarter, how not to. But to the point that you're talking about, we're also talking about there's two types of crowdfunding, which is product-based or equity-based. Equity-based crowdfunding is a little bit different. Equity-based crowdfunding is where you start to get people that are investing in that, and they're doing it under crowdfunding law, and they're actually taking an equity stake in the company. That's when it becomes really divisive, when other people are larger players are working behind the scenes. So, kind of different, apples to oranges kind of comparison.
But Dave, what's unique about Vancouver and the world of startups and incubators, innovation, and
yep.
What do we got?
Yeah, it's a really interesting area. It's big, and there are some big players that have been kind of historically unengaged, and that is changing. Portland has had the ear of the world, right? #1 greatest place to live, coming to the Pacific Northwest, and so it's been getting incredible growth. The other challenge with Portland is that it's kind of broke. They're closing schools, they're light rails, they're imposing corporate taxes, the rates, all the things are going up. So what happens is you have a ton of people that are moving to this area and then look and say, wait a minute, why would I move inside of a broke state where I can move over into Washington, which is basically a suburb of Portland, and have better schools, better cost of living, be able to afford my house and send my kids and just enjoy life better. So all that has brought a huge new energy to Vancouver that's starting to get the attention of those companies that have been non-engaged. So there's a ton of vitality going on. We've got $1 billion waterfront project. I don't know if you guys have seen that or know anything about it. I just took a hard hat tour of it. There's 2 buildings that are up right now. Ghost Runner Brewery is going to go in there, and Twigs Cafe is going to be. They're going to share one building. The other one is going to be Wildfin. It's a nice bistro restaurant. Those are going to be open by spring. The condos and the retail space that's going to go in there. It's Class A. I mean, this is top level stuff for the region. It's going to open up a lot and change people's minds. So companies are seeing that. They're seeing development projects, $1 billion development project that's kind of leading that, and they're saying, wow, this is a really interesting place to be. So you have companies like RealWear. Has anybody heard of RealWear? Yeah, so it's a head-mounted Android tablet. Their intellectual property is tied into the voice recognition piece, and they're working inside of manufacturing. So they were based out of the Bay Area and looking for a place. They just got a huge investment round, and were looking for a place to kind of make that stretch out. Looked into the area, and they moved up. So then they're in the barracks, right? So that's the kind of new story that you're finding. Discover.org is looking at putting in 200 to 300 new seats. They're expanding. They're on this. I want to say they're on the 7th and 8th floor, and they're moving to the 9th or down to the 6th. They're expanding that. Home Depot is a great success story. Yeah, those guys, and that's actually a really interesting story that I was talking about before, about the idea that you come in with is not the idea that happens, because they came in actually building custom trusses. Like when you build a building, you design the roof, those trusses are built to order, and they built out incredible trusses and started to build out an incredible system to be able to make those trusses, and that got the attention of Home Depot, and they saw the value inside of the software piece that they developed, and that became their product. They stopped making the trusses, and now they are the core contractor management quoting software for Home Depot.
What's the name of that?
Quote Center. Home Depot Quote Center. Yeah.
So that's what's going in. Is that what it is then that's going in? Is the Quote Center, is that going to be?
They're writing the software.
Okay.
So they're not physically staff that's helping. That happens at Home Depot, but the programming that they're putting in place is developing a software that Home Depot uses.
Yeah, there's a new 45,000 square foot physical plant going in over by Fred Meyer.
Right.
The IT center?
For a Home Depot?
For Home Depot.
Yeah, I thought the Vancouver Business Journal article said something about the fact that they were going to be staff in there.
They are.
I don't know if it was for the software company.
Yeah,
or
they were
for
looking.
Vancouver.
So they were out at the tech tours.
Yeah.
They were out at the tech tours, and they were looking for 40 people,
Yeah.
like hands down, and that was all generally support staff and project management, I think, and programming, obviously.
It's a big footprint. It's a big footprint that's going in over by Fred Meyer. That's a whole
Which
lot.
Fred Meyer?
Columbia
Fred Meyer on
Houseway.
Columbia Houseway.
Okay. So Grand Central?
Over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I haven't been to the new space. I know them. We just talked to them the other day. Yeah, I'm going out there for a tour though. Yeah.
So what else does Vancouver have? We have waterfront project going in. We have
A lot of downtown revitalization. They're basically talking about, here's the thing, Vancouver's been kind of old guard and new guard. The new guard is kind of winning right now. The old guard is dying off a little bit, so you have some aggressive growth plans. They would say, the developers would say, you want to change downtown? You put 10,000 units for people to live in. And that's basically what their plan is. That will drive commerce. That will drive new companies coming in. That will drive huge things. So yeah, there's a ton of vitality.
Now, I heard something the other day, and I need to find the actual source of the data, that the Vancouver core, downtown, has the highest density of millennials in Washington State, more so than Seattle, more so than Portland.
Really? I think what's really interesting is that's been a problem. When I say that kind of old guard and new guard, there's been a lack of millennial engagement. There's been a lack of energy, and the city's been doing some things over the past few years. The brew pubs and food carts and things, placemaking, what they would call it. That are starting to make a huge impact and difference, and that's starting to attract and keep some of the people as they're graduating out of WSU and Clark and wherever they're out of. So yeah, it's a thing. We have to really kind of maintain some of that energy. I agree. Yeah. Perfect Co is another company. I don't know who likes to make mixed drinks. Who likes to bake? Who likes smoothies? Came up with the idea. He's basically a crackpot toy developer. was kind of his background. Michael Wallace. There's two other Ivy League educated marketing experts that co-founded this. But basically, what they did is they cracked open a kitchen scale and put Bluetooth in it, and then wrote a pretty sophisticated app built on recipes to tell you how to mix the perfect drink, how to bake the perfect banana bread, how to make the perfect smoothie, based on actually amazing recipes. They have top award-winning chefs making these recipes.
Wow. So what's the product?
The product is a Bluetooth scale and an application.
Okay.
Right, and they have three different ones. So they have perfect drink, perfect bake, and perfect blend. And this goes again to kind of what your company becomes is you don't always foresee. It just seems like that's a cool idea, right? Is teach a consumer how to make the perfect Manhattan, how to make the perfect screwdriver or fuzzy navel or whatever it is, right? So oftentimes you kind of look at that. Well, here's what they found out is, when they did that, because it's cloud-based, they could now find out exactly what people were drinking and when. Data. And the value of that data, Smirnoff knows that they sold a bottle of whipped cream vodka at Fred Meyer, but they don't know when it's poured. They don't know how often it's poured. Literally, in their office, they have a map and can tell you the most popular drink at any given point across a timeline. 5 o'clock any time, they can tell you exactly what has happened, what's the most popular drink as 5 o'clock rolls across the time zones. That data is a huge value back to those distillers and those manufacturers. So there's that other play.
What's the name of the company again?
Perfect Company.
Perfect.
Yep. And the other thing that they've done is, because they're experts at recipes, who else uses recipes? Well, basically any food place. So now they're becoming the guts of larger corporations that need to have people make things correctly in the food service industry. You can just figure out who that might be. Who are some of the biggest players that are in that? Now, if you come up with a recipe for a new milkshake, instead of sending out the printed recipe, training all the employees on a weekend day how to make this new thing, if you could automatically have that downloaded to all of your locations and all of your stores, it's pretty powerful. So they have a whole separate industry, or a whole separate value proposition that they've made outside of, just the fact that I get to make my Manhattan right.
What if we could do that with Python? Perfect Python.
As long as I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Wow. The other thing, does someone have a question?
No.
What's Startup Weekend, Dave?
Startup Weekend. We'll be doing another one, April 6th. Startup Weekend is an event, so Techstars has the kind of shell, it's their deal, so it's listed on their websites, but it's all volunteers, and we put it on locally. They go on in 2,000 cities across the world, and it is a weekend. Who's familiar with a hackathon? Okay, hackathon is a weekend event or a day event or something where people come in and build something and compete with what they built over the weekend. Startup Weekend is exactly the same thing. On Friday night, it's a 54-hour event. On Friday night, anybody that comes in can pitch an idea. And they pitch an idea about a business. Wouldn't it be great if? Maybe it's a product, whatever it is. And then we basically take everybody goes through and pitches, and then by popular vote, we take the top ones. And if your idea doesn't get selected, you stay, but you jump onto another team of an idea that you like. We try and build out balance so that we have what we call hackers, hipsters, and hustlers. Hackers are the programmers, hipsters are the designers, hustlers are the salespeople and business development guys. And basically what we do is we lock you in the location for all Friday night, not all Friday night, until usually about 11, but all day Friday, or all day Saturday, and all day Sunday until about 7 o'clock. And then what we do is we pitch to a panel of experts, and there's prizes and bragging rights. Yeah.
Do you know where it's going to be?
Sorry?
Do you know where?
I do not. We had it here before, and it worked great. We broke out into some of the classrooms. We serve meals. There's 7 meals that are throughout the process. Dinner Friday night, breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Saturday and Sunday. So, like you say, you're kind of a hostage for the weekend. But some great ideas happen. Like I said, Cloudability actually came up with the idea at a startup weekend. Found a lot of traction out of it, and went into the Pi Accelerator and ended up taking investment, and now they've got, I think, somewhere around 60, 70 employees. Just going like gangbusters. So
CEO is from Vancouver.
He is, Matt Ellis. He lives up in Battleground now. Just moved. The event will happen April 6th of next year is when we're doing the next one. And it is open to anybody. It is really that, I have a crazy idea, or I want to be part of a great experience through the weekend. I have people that come in and don't pitch, but they just want to help and just kind of be part of the energy, because it is great. And we bring in experts through the weekend to help you turn that idea into something, turn it into a viable business, to prove out your business. You get judged on 3 things. It's your business model, your execution, and your validation. Have you proved it? So we actually physically kick you out of the building to go talk to people and say, hey, I'm doing this crazy thing over the weekend. I'm trying to build a hot dog stand. Would you buy hot dogs if I put it over here? Or I have a dating app. Would you pay for a dating app that did this for you? Something like that. So you get that physical validation. So those are the 3 things that we judge you on.
I was going to ask, so if you're creative and you want to jump on a team and work that way just for some experience, or
absolutely,
kind of portfolio building type stuff.
Yep.
Is
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. I've done 6 of them now. 2 is organizing, 3 is organizing, and 3 is participant. First one I did, I was a designer walking in, had no idea what I was really getting into, and I did the PowerPoint that was shown at the end. I designed a logo and I mocked up a website. Happened to be a crazy ass .NET team that came out of Washington that built the entire back end to the thing. I was like, what?
Over the weekend?
Yeah. Yeah, no, seriously, it was crazy. The only reason we didn't win, still 6 on my crawl, the only reason we didn't win is we had the largest team. It was 14 people that ended up being on the team, and there was a shift that happened and on the business model that we didn't validate. It's all good stuff. All those things happen, right? It may have been a good shift, but it turned into something that we hadn't validated. So when we got out there, had this kick-ass product. I was a designer, so of course it looked amazing. I get to say that. But the core piece of it that we presented was something that we hadn't validated. And then it just kind of became this what if, and they were like, yeah, you didn't prove that. So we didn't make it. We didn't win. But yes, it's a great thing. It's great for young programmers to kind of cut their teeth on stuff, designers to do it, people that have an idea that want to find out if it's something. They're just great experiences.
And it's fairly inexpensive, right?
Yeah, it's $100 for the weekend. $100 for the weekend, and like I said, literally it's 7 meals.
What happens to the ideas that don't win?
You know what? Techstars keeps track, and about 12% of the ideas that are pitched actually turned into companies afterwards. That's amazing. That is a huge statistic, and that's something to brag about, right? I know people that didn't win out of the 3 that we've done up here that have gone to turn those companies into something. So just because you didn't win doesn't mean anything, and just because there's a huge opportunity, right? And you'll meet people that are thinking the same way. One of the things about entrepreneurs is we're all just a little bit touched in the head. We don't really think right about things. And truthfully, you got to be around more people like that, because I made a decision to be around entrepreneurs because I love them. They think about possibilities. They don't complain about things. They're out to change it. And they're out to do something, and that's the kind of people I want to be around, right? And so you meet a ton of people that are like that, and you could find your co-founder out of there. You could find a programming team. Just great possibilities come out of stuff when you just kind of get in the right room.
3 takeaways, Dave, before we open it up for questions. What are the 3 things you want to send these people away? By the way, the name of the class is Business Web Practices,
right?
Where we're exploring all the different things that touch the web.
Yeah.
No pressure.
I think no. No, it always amazes me, the ideas that come out of people's heads, right? The experiences that you have painted the opportunities that you guys see. And believe in it. Believe in it, right? Believe in a crazy idea. But don't get married to it, right? You're gonna have to come up with that idea, but then you're gonna have to take expert advice. You're gonna have to find people that can contribute. And it's going to have to grow, but believe you can make something happen. Instagram is one of the great examples. I use this all the time. 13 people acquired for $2 billion out of an 18-month-old company. Excuse me? that kind of stuff. This time in history is full of stories like that, because we think of the web as a thing, and truthfully, it is starting to address our DNA and our brain waves in different ways. So huge things can happen, and it starts with ideas. The only challenge is learning how to turn that idea into something. So that would be one takeaway. Or is that two? Yeah, I don't know. Can I count that for two?
I'll let you slide. Okay, two.
The third takeaway.
Don't get into a startup, or don't be an entrepreneur if.
Oh yeah, no. It's like you mentioned a freelance, right? And entrepreneurism is a lonely road, right? Get used to top ramen and mac and cheese. Get used to your being late on your rent and having the electricity shut off. Those are realities, right? Those are realities. It's just because startups are not companies, right? Startups are not companies, period, end of story. Steve Blank early on wrote about this, is that a startup is a temporary organization in search of a repeatable, profitable business model, right? That means you're trying to figure shit out. You don't have the answers. So you have the answers means you're starting to get money for it. When you're trying to figure stuff out, you don't. So you're going to do this alongside of something that you're doing, right? 90% of entrepreneurs are doing this as side jobs, right? They're spending their evenings doing it. Don't put your life savings at risk, right? Don't mortgage the house, right? Those smart, there's some sort of common sense that we want to do, but believe that idea can be something, but don't be stupid enough to follow it in the face of evidence that you're not making it happen. Just know that there's a way to make it happen, and that's your job, is to figure it out. So I would advocate it. Like I said, but be ready for the bumps. Be ready for. Everybody says you have to have passion. I say passion's overrated. I kind of call that table stakes. Right? I don't talk to people that aren't passionate about their idea. I don't talk to people that haven't invested something inside of their idea to make it happen. But because it's table stakes, we don't spend a lot of time. I'm not going to coach you to be passionate. We're going to run with your passion. We're going to run from that point on. We're going to talk about your business. We'll talk about your idea, but I'm going to kind of assume that you're the expert inside of that. And we'll do some vetting. We'll do some pieces to kind of figure that out, and it may evolve the idea. But you got to be ready to take some rejection. You got to be ready to take some really tough times, and get used to perfecting the way that you describe what you're doing to people. Because it's not that your idea is wrong. Quite often, it's that they haven't lived your life of experience, so they can't see what you see. That's not on them. That's on you. You got to get better at explaining it.
Can I ask how many people in here would consider a startup? Anybody? Okay. Who would like never ever think about joining or starting a startup?
Not again.
Not again. Okay. You've been there. Okay. How many people have been part of one? Obviously. Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Does it count if it failed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What? I didn't hear what?
Does it count if it failed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you got to acknowledge. I mean, there's a huge failure rate inside of inside of startups, right? The successes are few and far between. Best industry stats, you'll hear tons of variance. I use 70% of startups fail. Some of them should. There are some people that really kind of have really bad ideas. I would say if you're looking at a startup, do your research, because 90%, and I've heard this out of people that run Techstars and 500 startups and Y Combinator, said within the first week, they will find 5 competitors for your idea that you didn't know about. And if you think you've got an idea, you better be damn sure you know who those are. It's not that you shouldn't do it if there are competitors, but you better know what your strategy is, to differentiate yourself and build value on top of those.
Any questions for Dave?
Yeah.
I was the one that mentioned freelancing earlier. Now, as a freelancer, would it be like are startups a lot of receptive to letting freelancers maybe volunteer their time in exchange for letting me put them on my resume and saying I contributed to this startup, based on experience? Because I know when freelancers starting out, they have to volunteer their time or do a lot of stuff for free. Right. Are startups receptive to letting freelancers come in and volunteer their time, since it is kind of a low expectation of being paid or having to be pay somebody to do something for them?
That's a whole nother talk. It is a whole nother talk. Short answer, yes. Second answer, don't undersell yourself. Yeah. If you're good, you're worth being paid. That's the short answer.
Melissa.
Okay, and it's probably another talk because it's also about independent contractors.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what is the difference between being an independent contractor, creating, let's say you're really good at creating, you have your personal professional website up, and you're like, oh, I make logos and I do this and I can help add to your website and I'll charge this much and that's it, versus creating a business in a way that's also like Feline. She is a professor and she has a business where she does websites for small companies.
Right.
I don't know if would you be an independent contractor or an actual business where you do a business license?
Yeah, it's a solopreneur is kind of the deal, right? So an independent contractor is somebody that's going to work on 1099 with other companies. And so you would set up as a sole proprietor or as a single member LLC, and you're working on behalf. So an independent contractor could go work for Nike through a placement agency. Right. A lot of my work, I used to work with Nike directly, and then they made this kind of shift and said, nope, we're only going to deal with placement agencies. So there's three or four major placement agencies, right? So you can make an entire career out of just doing that, right? But yeah, it's different. It's like, it's a whole thing, right? Are you going to call yourself? I used to call myself a virtual agency because I would be able to design something, and I would call in a web programmer, I would call in a videographer, I would call in a writer. So basically, I'm an agency, but it was me in my house.
Customer didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, if they were smart, they did, but. There's a whole ego thing in the way you position it. That's why I say it's a whole nother talk. But it's all valid. It's a matter of you choosing your value and positioning that value.
Who else?
So kind of on that same line. Is there any agencies? Since I moved here, I've tried to work with agencies or trying to tempt agencies to do recruitment or whatever for contract work. But I was never able to find anything in Vancouver. So is there...
Not enough in Vancouver. No, most of my work, until probably 5 years ago. So I moved up here in 2005, or 2000, and until 5 years ago, I didn't do any work here. All mine was in Portland.
Okay.
It was in Portland and Seattle and San Francisco. I didn't deal anything in Vancouver.
Are there names of agencies?
Yes. Vitamin Talent, Vitamin T, 24/7, and Matthews Potestio. Yes, very solid agencies. Matthews Potestio is definitely a personal touch. Great people over there. Vitamin T is a little bit more corporate. They again have some good people. And
what about AHA?
AHA? AHA is really interesting. So they are an agency. I don't know that they pull in many contractors. I never focused on them. I know Betsy Henning, who runs it really well, but I never contracted out with them. Yeah. Then there's Gravitate, if you're a programmer and designer as well. Blue Blazes, another local agency, and there's a few smattering of smattering of other smaller, but yeah, that's part of what will happen as industry starts to grow. We'll start to get more agencies that are doing, because that's what's going to happen is, like, if you set up an agency and start to build up, you start to get too busy. You need to pull on contractors, and pretty soon you pull on enough contractors, you've got enough consistent work, you go, oh crap, I might need to be real. I might need to go get an office. I might need to have 5 people on staff or something to do the work. So yeah, I'm all for it. Start out as freelance, do your stuff, and start to see if you can build up that consistency. You turn into an agency here, I'll be one of your first customers. Love it.
I don't want to start my agency.
It's a whole nother deal, man.
Melissa will start when you go work on
I'll work for you.
There you go.
All right, who else? Go on. Jag, Eugene, Harry, anybody? Steve?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that one of the things that would be important to keep in mind as an entrepreneur is not to be too attached to your idea as is,
Yep.
as far as what your idea is at the beginning isn't necessarily what it's going to be at the end. How often do you meet people that actually grasp that from the beginning, that are willing to let their idea evolve and not be so egotistical to say, well, or staying in towards the end? Like, how many people have you seen, like, say, oh, well, I've done what I can with the idea that I had. I can step back and see the fruits of my labor.
Yeah. Not a lot.
It's against human
Not a
nature,
lot.
I think. I don't think
It's what?
Yeah, I think it's against human nature. You get
It is.
attached.
It's a human nature thing. Yeah, it really is. Your idea starts to make sense to you for a business or for what you're trying to build. It starts to make sense to you because of all of your experiences. I always use the analogy of trying to teach kids baseball, right? And I would use this analogy all the time, right? You tell kids to get down on the baseball. This is a basic fundamental of fielding a ball, right? Is that you have to get down on the ball, right? And they would sit here and they would go like this, and the ball would go through their legs and it would be gone. And I'm like, no, I said get down on the ball, and they were, I was down, right? Their reality didn't understand what I meant was like this, right? That glove is touching the ground. They're way down, right? Everything else, nothing made sense to them until I kind of hammered them with that, right? And they didn't understand it. But then when they understood it, all I had to do was remind them again. But they didn't have the concept at all in the beginning. And so you tell people intellectually that their idea needs to change, but it doesn't make sense when it comes up. You think you do change, right? You think you're open-minded. I always talk about change. Here's the easiest way to think about change, right? You want to see how easy change is? Wash someplace different the first when you go into the shower next time. Right? You get into the shower, it's just kind of rote, man. It's like you're half asleep or do something. You start in your armpits, you start in your head, you start in your leg, whatever, right? Try doing it differently.
Yeah, if you break your arm or leg or something, if you have to do stuff, you notice right away.
Exactly. And you just don't realize that how hard change actually is. And that's the same sort of thing, right? Is my idea going to make it? You don't realize it when you're going through it until you get forced. And then something kind of switches and you go, oh, I get it. But as an entrepreneur, one of the best things you can do is start to realize that buck stops with you, right? At the end of the day, it's all about you. And so you may not take on everybody's advice, but you should really listen and weigh it and pay attention to it.
And be honest with those people who are wanting to be the entrepreneurs and not just be yes friends.
Yeah,
That's
I
a hard thing to do.
I tell a lot of people.
Buddy or whomever, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. And truthfully, I tell a lot of people I'm really brutal. I will tell you whether I think it's a good idea or not. I will tell you whether your idea is really not any good. But I do it with compassion, right? I'm not doing it just to be a dick. I'm not doing it just to kind of, say I know everything. It's It's not. It's because two things. First of all, I understand that the idea is going to have to evolve and that there's potential. And so we can agree that there's a good start. If it's not a good start, I'll let you know. I'll tell you that's not a good place to start. And it could be because I know competition. It could be because I know of other companies that have tried it. I might understand the marketplace a little bit better. I might, whatever it is, right? And it's not meant to be an ego hit. This is the big challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs is they take it as an ego hit. And what you have to do is you have to get that piece out of your system, and you have to be able to move beyond it. You have to take it as criticism, as constructive, and be able to say, oh, it's not my idea, it's the way I think about my idea. I was just talking to my lawyer just before I came over here, and he was apologizing for smashing down an idea that I had. And because I was questioning him, he told me something, and I wasn't arguing for my idea. I was questioning harder to try and find out why he didn't think what I was saying was a good idea. And he's like, "Well, I don't mean to step on your idea." And I'm like, "No, you're not hearing me, right? This is like a math formula for me, right? If I'm not the one to do this idea because of my skills, my background, and expertise, fine. I'll find people. I want to find out, this is about the people, your experience and the people that you have. What are the other pieces that you see that make this a bad idea? So you approach problems differently. So, it's kind of a long answer, but.
That's okay. Anything else for Dave? We got two more. See you there.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about how you organize your time, or how you suggest to entrepreneurs who are basically operating solo, how they should organize their time so they're not spending too much
How
time.
to organize my time?
Yeah.
Cocaine, caffeine, and a very understanding family. No cocaine, tons of caffeine, and I kind of work 20 hours a day. I really do. I love what I do. There used to be a lot of people that would talk about work-life balance. I threw that out a long time ago. I love what I do. I love the people that I work with when I do it. And so my vocation is my avocation. I really am passionate about if these people that I'm working with that are building the companies, if I wasn't working with them in a business situation, they'd be my friends. Because I love the mindset. I love the drive. I love the energy. And so they're the people that I hang out with. So that said, I am becoming a slave to my calendar anymore. If it doesn't go on my calendar, it isn't real. To the point that I've had to, buy an Alexa Dot to sit in my living room so that my wife can say, "Where's Dave now? What's on his calendar?" And she can find out whether I'm going to be home for dinner or not. So they do a lot of evening events and stuff like that. I'm not a task list guy either. So to-do management doesn't work for me. I do a lot of Post-it notes and a lot of gut check. Of what the hell what am I missing today? What am I dropping today?
And you use a journal.
And I what?
And you have a journal, don't you?
I do. I never go anywhere without this. And I've kind of become a slave to, I'm consistently writing stuff down. And I have about 15 of these, all the same model that are up on a shelf. It's a little bit OCD, but it works.
Lena, did you have a question?
Yeah, it kind of goes along with the time management type of thing, only in a broader way. You're contracting, and on the side you're doing the bootstrap thing with an entrepreneurial idea that you're working on. At what point do you then go to founders and say, hey, I think this is ready to incubate? How far along? I mean, I feel like I'm not really clear on that.
Describe it a little bit more. Maybe I'm not understanding.
Like, I'm not sure where in the process you should feel comfortable presenting an idea. Like, if it's just an abstract idea and you don't have any logistics in place, obviously you're not going to want to show up.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I always say you got to have somebody to talk crazy to. right? Most of us, like my wife, I cannot talk crazy to my wife. The what if, wouldn't it be great if, isn't this cool kind of collaboration thing. My wife loves me, has kind of done, but my contract, when I lied to her and told her I was going to be successful and you know, the millionaire by the, in 2 years, was that was about security. So a lot of times the relationships that we're in, we don't have people that we can kind of talk crazy to, what if, and something. So when I say I hang out with people like that, it's never too early to talk about those ideas. It's never too early to talk about those ideas. But you got to be around people that understand how to take ideas and turn them into something. And and that becomes a skill. It becomes it's a muscle. You practice that. I know somebody that came up with an idea for a very basic idea to solve a problem with growlers that they were buying. And he told me the idea, and I wasn't kind, but I also said, okay, but what if? And we took that idea and then shifted it into something else, right? This idea I didn't see as a business.
But you tweaked it, and then suddenly
right.
There's a new possibility.
Because I'm used to talking crazy.
Okay.
I'm used to talking crazy, right? So find people to talk crazy to. Find people that can help you with that idea. And sometimes and then there's this balance between, God, wouldn't it be great if? Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be, oh, that would be amazing. That would be so cool. And people start to get their adrenaline up and they're all hyped up about it. And it's like, great, now let's take off the adrenaline and let's put on the other hat. And let's say, wait a minute. So if we did this, could we find, is there a business to be built out of it? Because the people that we surround you, if you say you start up a business, the first thing that's going to happen is people they're going to love it, right? People around you are going to say one of two things. They know, when you stole the car in high school and crashed into a ditch, and they're going to call you a loser kind of perpetually. That's their mindset of you, right? The other is, oh my God, that's amazing. And you could tell them that you were knitting sweaters for cats, right? Is there any cat lovers? Sorry. I saw that. She had meow on her shirt. I should have seen the shirt. Yeah, but and truthfully, you could build a company out of sweaters for cats.
Except cats don't like wear sweaters.
There you go.
I wouldn't buy one. But truthfully, what you'd have to do is you'd have to prove out the market, right? So the idea of being able to talk crazy, I mean, for God's sake, there's somebody and they're local. There's somebody on Shark Tank that had the Lick-a-Pet. Who's seen that?
Oh my gosh, I have seen that. That is insanity.
Oh
you hold
my God.
Your teeth and then
Yeah. This is for bonding with your cat.
Yeah.
It's this
a giant
rubber tooth comb that you bite onto, and then you lick your cat. Yes.
Yeah.
God's honest truth.
Dang, we're on video here.
I swear to God. No, it's on Shark Tank, and they're local. They did it on the heels of a remote control cat toy that they did that was actually a really successful Kickstarter campaign. And then they just believed their own press and thought they could make this licking cat thing. I don't know. But
on that note, Dave, we need to wrap it up because we're at time. So how about we tell Dave how we really feel about it?
Awesome.
that was better than I expected.